ask me that question, I'll say, oh, 84 years, because it's the story of my life. But of course, the actual writing, I think probably about 4 years, and then it was another year before it actually was ready for publication because of the editing. But its story is longer than that because I kept a journal since I was in my later 30s. And my journal has really personal stuff in it, you know, how I was feeling and what I was doing. And often there was things happening and I was quite confused about what was happening. And so all that sits in there. When I had moments of insight, I wrote them down. Anything and everything, really, but it was my inner life, not so much about what I was doing on the outer life. You know, there was things there because that often triggered things as well. So I had all these journals, you know, a big stack of exercise books of them. And when I retired from my formal roles, I thought, maybe I should read those journals. And then maybe I'll pick out a few highlights and write my story. Well, it doesn't work like that. Because when I started to read, I thought, oh my goodness, is that who I was when I was in my 30s? Or is that who I was when I was in my 40s? Oh my goodness. And, you know, so often I was confused about, well, what on earth is going on in me? But reading it from this perspective of today, I could see what it was all about. And I could kind of see the wisdom that was coming through, which I didn't have a clue about at the time. So writing or reading through those journals in order to write the book, that was a whole process in itself. And in a sense, I wanted to write not from how it was when I was in my 30s or 40s, but from how I understand it today. But I used a lot of quotations from my journals to just illustrate what I was talking about or what I was experiencing at the time. So in a sense, the book, it's like an edited version of my life story. Because I tell the story and then I quote. So it takes you back into that time. I mean, I'm describing that time, but from an understanding of today, if you know what I mean. So in a sense, it was like moving back and forth. And so then it was about writing. And I'm a slow writer, actually, because I just write everything down. And then I have to sort of shape it up. So I think of writing a bit like a sculpting. So I've got all the raw material written there, but the sentences are all over the place and often not very clear. And where's the sequence and how do you write it into paragraphs? And sometimes I write a sentence 4 or 5 times before it actually captures what I want to say. And I find that a fascinating process. It's like something in me is watching the artist in me at work. Now, I've never thought of myself as an artist, but I really think that writing clearly is a form of art. But of course, it wasn't just about writing clearly. I really wanted to share with readers I guess the humanity of my journey, because one of the things that I'm really aware of is it's the human journey. It's not just Corrie's journey. It's got a particular jacket that's got Corrie's clothes on, but the inner reality of it, in some sense, most people would recognise. In fact, I had a woman ring me up the night before the launch here in Melbourne, and she says, Corrie, I read your book, you've written my story. Well, that just blew me away because I thought that is exactly, I mean, I've never sort of thought it that way, but that's what I would hope people would recognise so that they come to value their own life experiences in a new way. Because we become who we are by living the journey, but you don't know where you've been until you look back and say, oh, that's where I was, and that's how I got here. Which is, I mean, it's still, it still has me quite amazed that that's the journey and that I've made that journey. And so, in a sense, I feel that writing this book, and you know, I spent a lot of time reflecting, what do I need to write? What part of that experience needs to be written and told and shared? And how do I do that? But it's not just what happens with the sentences on the page. In the process, it was doing things for me, so that I think it was like, in one sense, I think of it as a harvesting of the experiences and the wisdom of my life. But more than that, it was like a process of integration. So that when eventually this book was finished, I kind of felt more whole and younger, in a sense, younger than I've ever felt, because all those things that, you know, I thought were burdens and rah, 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 they're not burdens anymore. They're part of the full colour spectrum of my story. And one of the things I woke up to a few years ago, I was in an art gallery and I was looking at the different paintings, and there was one painting there that was really very beautiful, and yet it seemed to lack something, and I realised it didn't have any really dark colours or dark shadows, and it missed the depth in terms of capturing, and I'm not an artist, but in terms of capturing a picture and the detail, it was beautifully done. But it's the shadows and the dark in life that bring out the depth of the light and the colours. And I think that's very much so. It's a good metaphor for what our life story is. Of course, when I was writing, at times I would be quite nervous about putting this out to a public, and then somebody says, well, you have to launch your book, and I was thinking, oh, I couldn't stand up and say this is my story, you know. It was so revealing, if you like, and I'd be there like without my clothes on. And yet after it was published, and when I was getting ready for the book launch, I quite changed about that. I thought, no, this is my story. And if I hide those dark things and my confusion and the bad things that I've done, well, I don't know how bad they are, but how badly I experienced them, then I'm really telling a fairy tale, not the reality. And I want people to be able to recognise, and this is one of the things that I now am enormously grateful for, the dark times, for the tough times, because it's precisely there that growth happens, that transformation happens. I wouldn't be the person I am if it wasn't for those experiences. I'd be much more superficial. And by nature, I'm a bit of a Pollyanna. You know, I look for the happy in life, and I look for the happy endings and happily ever after. But that's very superficial. And so if I hadn't experienced the difficult times, I probably would never have depthed what the dark times have given me. And so I lost my shyness about putting it out. I thought, well, people might as well know me as I am, rather than what I'd like to think people might want to see. You know, it's the only person I've got, and if you don't like it, well, that's okay. But it won't take anything away from me. You know, the question that runs through much of this book is, well, let me then put it slightly differently. When I was young, I had ideas of who I should be. And the more I tried to be that person, the less it worked. And then what I came to realize was, and it sort of happened during a retreat, Corrie, you've got to forget about the person you think you ought to be and become the woman I created you to be. And, you know, that sounds pretty simple, but it had to come to me again and again and again until eventually I grew into accepting myself as I was. But it took years because I didn't think there was too much innately in myself that was worth having, which of course is ridiculous. I mean, a lot of people think that. I've experienced that over my years working with people. We see everybody else as something else and great, but we don't see ourselves for who we are. And so we think in order to be somebody in this world, I've got to be like this or that or something else, or I've got to achieve this or that or something else. I was at a play the other night, and this man wanted to be an artist, but he fancied himself an artist, and it was all about who he would be if he was a famous artist. And of course his art didn't have any vitality in it, because his focus was not really on art, it was on himself. And I think that's what happens until we learn to accept ourselves as we are, the reality of who we are. So, Corrie, you have to learn, forget about the Corrie you think you ought to be, and become the Corrie I created you to be. And then on the flip side of that was, and you've got to forget about the Jesus you think I am, or the God you think I am, and let me lead you to see the Jesus I am, the God that I really am. Because again, you know, we hear stories as children and we get these fancy thoughts, but when you actually start to look at the raw reality of say, the Jesus story in the Gospels, it was no picnic, really. I mean, it might sound lovely to have angels singing when you're born, but to be born in a stable and next finding yourself as a baby in a refugee family going to Egypt, I mean, that's no joke, as we know from so many refugee people today. But, you know, you grow up with this romantic idea of being born in a stable with shepherds coming and kings coming and angels singing. And, well, I'm not too sure that Mary heard too many angels sing. I think it was the gospel way of saying, hey, this is something really sacred, which every birth of every baby is. And we don't hear angels for that. Right? So that kind of romantic imaging that I had as a child needed to come down to a reality. And then, of course, much later in my life, I started to read and learn about the universe and evolution. And, you know, I'd heard the word evolution over the years, of course I had, but I had no idea what it really was. And then I read this book telling the story of the universe as scientists were discovering it through the last, at that stage it was 120 years or so. The book, it was probably 30 years since I read that book. And what I realised was that evolution happens, new things come forth when there is tension, when there is stress, when things are up against the wall, they can't go any further where they are, well, something new's got to happen or the whole thing dies. Well, it's the same in our story, really. So, you know, we are also evolving. And I think that is quite amazing. the title says it all, I think. As I was reading my journals and pondering the experiences of my life, I realized that everything in life is gift. I've done all these achievements. Well, actually, have I? Because where did I get the capacity, the talents, the gifts, the capability? Where did I come from myself? Where did I have the health and fitness to do the things that I've done? What enabled me to live through the hard times and the challenges of life? The strength, the giftedness comes from elsewhere, and that's grace. And I think that's spirituality at its deepest level, because it's realizing who we are in the bigger picture of things and our place there. And the beauty of that is that you can just let go, because I don't have to hold that place. So that's why I called the book Grace Beyond Telling. But the subtitle is A Soul's Dark Journey, because I didn't know until I got to the end of it what it was all about, till I read through all my journals. I began to see, and of course it wasn't all dark. You have your moments of light. But basically it's learning to journey your life in trust, not quite knowing what's going to come out. So that's what I wrote about. And that's why I chose the picture on the cover, which is a picture I took when we were camping out at Lake Mournpool in northwest Victoria. And it was sunrise. And I went for a walk and I thought, oh, quick, I've got to go back and get my phone. And I took this photo, and because it's still basically dark, and yet you have this beautiful light coming through, and it just adds to the beauty of the photo. So that's why I chose it. And the publisher said, yeah, we can use that. One of the things that I wrote in the back of it, that I wrote my thank you, was that I hope the reader will find echoes of themselves in my story and will realise that they too are graced beyond telling, enormously gifted and loved, even if a lot of their life has been in disappointment or hurt, or maybe they haven't been loved in the way they wanted to be. But in the bigger picture, we're always loved. The universe owns us. We belong here, even if the people that we most want to love us don't. And I think if a reader comes to realise who they are themselves, who are you really? Who am I really? And when you make your peace with that who, if you need to make your peace with it or discover it, then you discover joy, you discover light. You become young again in your spirit. And I hope that the readers has tasted something of that. Maybe I'm too ambitious, but that's what it's done for me.